Hello, this is Heather Hoffman, and I'm here today to share a couple of very simple, neutral sympathy cards. Sometimes it's really fun just to do tone-on-tone heating embossing for a really elegant card. And while nobody really loves making sympathy cards, they're one of those oftentimes needed cards, and I always like to have a few in my stash, and I recently have been feeling like I didn't really have very many on hand, so I thought this would be a good time to kind of build up my collection of those a little bit. I'm using a few older Reverse Confetti stamp sets for this card. I'm starting off with Elegant Florals there. It's one of my favorite simple floral sets. And then I'm also using a sentiment from Sentimental Sayings for this card. And then for the second card, I'll be using Forever in Our Hearts. They both have great sympathy sentiments. So I played with a few different arrangements on these cards, and I'm going to make two different colors. This first one is Iced Aqua, and then the other one is Baby Blue Cardstock. And I'm running my embossing tool, my powder tool, over the cardstock first. And then I'm going to use my Misty to line up and stamp those images just with clear embossing ink. And I'm stamping them several times, partly because the Misty allows me to do this. And I know I'll make sure and get a really solid, clear impression. But also with the clear embossing, I really want every bit of this just to show up perfectly. And stamping it several times is a great way to kind of ensure that that happens. So same thing down at the bottom there. I'm using my embossing powder tool. And if you've never used a powder tool, what that is going to allow you to do is to kind of go over and remove any static or any oils from your fingers from the cardstock. And then when you stamp and emboss, that embossing powder won't stick to any stray places that you don't want it to. So it's a great thing to use when you're heat embossing like this. I'm using clear embossing powder over that clear embossing ink. And while you think this would be invisible and not show on colored cardstock, it does a great job. You can just see as that powder melts, it adds a really soft, almost shimmery little bit of color. And it just kind of pops against, but it's really soft and subtle and neutral. And I'm hitting it a little bit from the back of that cardstock as well, because heat embossing will warp that cardstock slightly. So doing the back's going to kind of help flatten it back down. All right, by the time I got to this blue one, I changed my mind, and instead of keeping the top folding card base, I'd gone ahead and trimmed off that extra panel in the back. So I'm going to trim these down a little bit once I'm done doing the heat embossing, and this is going to allow me to place them on a white card base and leave a little bit of a white border around the edges. My original thought was just to keep them plain and on the solid color cardstock as card bases, but I decided I wanted to kind of change that up a little. So I've already trimmed the back off of this one. I'm going to do the same on this other one. And then I'm going to go all the way around all four edges, now that I've already got everything stamped and heat embossed, and just take off an 1/8 inch around. You could do it all from just top, bottom, and one side, or however you want to do that. But since I already had these centered just as I wanted, going around and taking that off of each edge helped me kind of keep everything centered the way I wanted it to be to place on my card bases. You can see that small white border now. I have those white card bases from Premier Polar White Cardstock. And I've gone ahead to make sure that they fit where I want. Then I'm going to add to that tone-on-tone look by doing a little bit of ink blending around those outer edges, using, of course, the coordinating confetti colors that go with that same color of solid cardstock. So for the baby blue cardstock one, I'm using baby blue dye ink. And for the Iced Aqua one, I'm using Iced Aqua ink. And I'm just trying to give a little bit of a soft, kind of just a vignetting effect around the outer edges. It just kind of helps draw your eyes into the middle and add a little bit of depth and shadow. All right, and then as one final touch, I wanted to add some white splatters. And I left this part in here, even though it was kind of a bit of a mistake. I have two bottles with the white paint, and this one had kind of thickened up a little bit more. I need to add some water, so it was kind of coming out a little more blobby and stringy than I really wanted. So I used that white cardstock just to kind of mop it off a little bit. And you notice it leaves a little bit of a white, but I kind of didn't mind the way that that turned out. It almost gave it kind of a bokeh effect a little bit on the background. And then I pulled my other little bit of white paint splatters out that I had that was the right consistency. And it's just white acrylic paint mixed with water, but when you have not enough water, it gets a little thick and globby. So I'm going to add a little more water to that one bottle to fix that. But there we go. Those cards are finished. I adhered them once that paint dried onto my white card bases and finish off these simple sympathy cards. Thanks so much for coming by today. Have a wonderful day.